Ezra's eagle has captured the imagination of many in the LDS community. It describes a prophecy written in the 11th and 12th chapters of the Apocryphal book of Esdras, which is another spelling of Ezra, that describes what some believe is a sequence of events leading up to the second coming, and can help pinpoint the timeline of these last days events. As I have had family members as well as those posting in comments say that they would like me to do a video on Ezra's eagle, I thought I'd spend some time on that today. First, let's understand where the prophecy comes from. It comes from the second book of Esdras, chapter 11, with some of the interpretation of the vision in chapter 12. This is an apocryphal book. That means it isn't part of the official canon of Scripture. The topical guide has this to say about the Apocrypha. First, it states that Apocrypha means, quote, secret or hidden, and then goes on to say, by this word is generally meant those sacred books of the Jewish people that were not included in the Hebrew Bible. They are valuable as forming a link connecting the Old and New Testaments, and are regarded in the Church as useful reading, although not all the books are of equal value. They are the subject of a revelation recorded in Doctrine and Covenants 91, in which it is stated that the contents are mostly correct, but with many interpolations by man. Interpolations meaning things added or injected into the text by men. So the Church states that the Apocrypha can be useful and valuable, but we need to take some of it with a grain of salt, or more specifically, only rely upon it with the help of the Spirit. I personally love the books from the Apocrypha, and while I try to look on them through a more careful lens, I personally have found great truths in them and enjoy reading and studying them. Let's better understand Esdras. There's first Esdras, which seems to be a contemporary to Nehemiah in the Old Testament, and the writings include those discussing the Babylonian conquest. As a result, there are many that believe 2nd Esdras is the second book of the same author, much like 1st Nephi is the same as 2nd Nephi, or 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Peter. But most scholars, of which I am not one, do not believe this. They believe that 2nd Esdras was written in the 1st century AD. This gives me my first potential red flag on the book, because we know that within the several decades after Christ's death, the apostasy began due to the death of all those holding the priesthood. We can't be certain that this writer, who most believe was a scribe, had the priesthood or was a prophet or an apostle at all, but we can't discount it either. Back to the Guide to the Scriptures, in the section under the Apocrypha, it says, quote, among these books, the following are of special value, and then lists 14 books. 2nd Esdras is listed second in that list. It then describes the book in this way. The second book of Esdras, containing 7 visions or revelations made to Ezra, who is represented as grieving over the afflictions of his people and perplexed at the triumph of Gentile sinners. The book is marked by a tone of deep melancholy. The only note of consolation is presented in the thought that the retribution that is to fall upon the heads of the Gentiles who have crushed the Jews. The references to the Messiah deserve special notice. Many scholars feel the book was composed in the 1st century AD. Many Christian religions consider 2nd Esdras as part of their regular canon, while others do not. But let's get into Ezra's eagle, which is described in the 11th chapter. It has imagery similar to that found in the book of Revelation. It describes an eagle that comes up from the sea and has 12 feathered wings and 3 heads. Later, it seems to change from 12 wings to 12 feathers by some interpretations. Then there are 8 short feathers as well, making a total of 20 feathers. 14 of these feathers are on the eagle's left wing, your right, while the remaining 6 are on the eagle's right wing, your left. Some of the feathers are short and others are long. The inference made in chapter 11, combined with the actual interpretation listed in the following chapter, seems to note that each feather represents a ruler or a king or a president or someone leading the greatest nation in the world. By greatest, I will quote verse 2, which says, "She spread her wings over all the earth." By this image being both an eagle as well as the worldwide influence that exists today, some believed this to be a representation of America in the last days. with each of these feathers representing a president of the United States. They start at Herbert Hoover because the second feather seems to get an extra long term in office and never to be repeated again, as stated in Chapter 11. And since Franklin Delano Roosevelt technically had 4 terms, although he died in the beginning of his 4th term, this is where they match where presidents go and with which feather. The prophecy then talks about long feathers and short feathers, and if you read the verses, you can see how someone would attempt to match the various presidents to these long and short feathers, with the short feathers being those presidents that didn't serve full terms, such as JFK, who was assassinated, as well as Nixon due to impeachment. By this mapping, Obama becomes the 14th feather. Understand that the prophecy states that all of these leaders would be under the control of a great head, or in this case, heads, the 3 heads of the eagle. But the heads are asleep at this time. Then a feather comes along on the right side, your left, of the eagle that is contrary, or goes against the wishes of the head, and it begins to take actions to end their rule. This continues for the next 5 leaders as well. Those that believed in the prophecy believed that President Trump was the first contrary feather on the opposite side that wasn't controlled by the heads. All 6 feathers on this wing are short feathers, meaning their rule would end early. It also states that they would all be against the evil heads, which destroy each of these rulers and then destroy each other. You should understand that this interpretation of the prophecy came out and was widely publicized in social media during the Trump administration, and led some to believe that Trump's time in office would be cut short. Some believe that his time was in fact cut short through illegal voting processes and therefore still follow and believe this interpretation. This picture shows Mike Pence as the second short feather on the eagle's right side from a time they thought that Trump would be impeached or assassinated and have his term ended early. The prophecy around Ezra's eagle has a lot of details, and those that believe, or still believe, had mapped organizations and a host of details including who the eagle's heads represent and how future events might play out based on this interpretation. In reality, the events did not play out as some that believed in this interpretation thought that they would, and as such, even one of the original authors of this theory have since come out and said that they were completely wrong. From his own blog posted on the day that President Biden took office, it reads, "Well, friends, as I suggested in my last several tweet threads over the last month, which hardly anyone saw, thanks to the great Orwellian conservative social media purge of 2021, it seems to me that both the Ezra's Eagle prophecy and QAnon were simply wrong." He goes on to say that some believe the prophecy, as described, is still on track, with Trump being a short feather, with their belief that the presidency was stolen from him through an unfair election. The author here says that even if that is the case, Biden can't be a short contrary feather going against the system, and therefore the interpretation that he had written and that had been widely circulating for years was in fact false. You can read more about this on his own blog. The link is listed here. I'm actually really impressed with the author, as it wouldn't be easy to admit that you're wrong, although there is obviously some right-wing bias that's still present. We have all seen someone interpret something, and then when it is wrong, or doesn't pan out, they double down, they change their theory, and they keep going, leading themselves and others further down the wrong path. So often we can get in trouble when we push our interpretation of Scripture onto others, especially if we predict events or specific dates. When they don't pan out, those strong and faithful followers move on, looking for the next evidence of their beliefs, while those that are not so strong may fall away, having tied their testimony to these interpretations and or individuals, and when they are wrong, they believe the gospel to be wrong, and I find that tragic. Here's the problem. Anytime you read something and try to map it to current events or biased beliefs, you need to be very, very careful. People always like to believe that the scriptures are talking about them and their day and their circumstances, and in reality, often they're not. We try so hard to make the pieces of the puzzle fit that sometimes we ignore gaps and cut off the edges and pieces to make them fit. Yes, we know that much of Scripture talks about the last days, but the last days started 200 years ago and will go on for some time into the future. Mapping specific verses to specific events can be difficult, and we should take great care when we try to do it. If you read 2nd Esdras, chapters 11 and 12, which is online for anyone to read, you can find this to be the case. Several things that are said don't exactly line up with interpretations or were just ignored for the greater belief around the parts people wanted to believe. I had several people over the past many months ask me what I thought about Ezra's eagle, and I asked them if they had actually read 2nd Esdras 11 and 12, and not a single one of them had. They had all just listened to podcasts or watched YouTube videos or read blogs about it, which left out critical details that if they had just read it, they may have felt differently about it than what was actually interpreted by somebody else. What we should all be doing more is read and try to understand the meaning in scriptures without any bias or preconceived ideas and see where it takes us. I don't want to sound critical to the author of the interpretation either, because I think mapping all of this was pretty ingenious, but in the end got it wrong. We need more people looking and reading the scriptures in that way, but perhaps fewer coming to biased conclusions that they believe are 100% correct. I know that this stuff can be exciting, but it can also be spiritually dangerous. So what do I think 2nd Esdras is talking about? 2nd Esdras 12:25 talks about these events happening at the quote last end. This and other verses make me believe that if this is a real prophecy, and again, I'm not sure based on when and who it was written by that that's true, but if this is a real prophecy, then this will come to pass near the end of the world, during that time after the millennium when Satan is loosed for a little season and the final battle happens just before the world is celestialized. But we are a long ways off from that, and none of us will be around here to validate it. But that is my sense, but I could easily be wrong. It is just my personal opinion. Remember that when the scriptures talk about the quote last days, they may not always be talking about right now. For example, it was common during the New Testament times to talk about the quote last days, and what they were actually talking about was the Roman conquest of Jerusalem that happened in 70 AD. We talk about the last days, speaking of the second coming. This is the most common use in Scripture. But sometimes when Scripture talks about the last days, it is talking about the very last days, after the millennium when the earth will be celestialized. When you hear about something like Ezra's eagle, and we are in the last days, so we're going to hear more and more of these types of things. Do your own study and research. Study it out in your mind and take it to the Lord to get the answers. Please don't rely on my videos or anyone else's to figure out what you believe. Do the work yourself and you will find your mind will be enlightened in ways that only the Spirit can do. Thanks for watching.